Born out of the ashes of the Holocaust, it was just one day old when it was attacked by 12 armies that the world fully expected would annihilate it. There was one tank and 5 cannon with which to fight back an armada against them. And yet, Israel won. How? Every time Israel has been attacked, Pentagon and Kremlin leaders have declared defeat as inevitable. The military experts at West Point won't study Israel's wars because their outcomes are too impossible. But the anomalies don't stop on the battlefield. How did Hebrew become the only dead language in history to be revived after 2,000 years? Why would millions of people from around the world leave their homes and move to a desert wasteland to build new lives for themselves? How did these people manage to turn a land more than 80% desert into one of the largest food and flour exporters in the world? Why have incredible achievements in science, medicine, and new technologies happened here in greater concentration than anywhere else? There are no logical answers.
Please fasten your seatbelts for the rest of the flight, and welcome to...
If God makes history, how can I understand why so many terrible things have befallen Jews over the centuries? How can I explain the destruction of Israel by the Romans, the pogroms of the Russian Tsars, the Nazi Holocaust? Where was God in history at those times? For me, today raised more questions than answers. But some stories step outside the realm of good luck. You either have to believe or you don't. There's no middle ground. I'm meeting a former army commander in Jerusalem today with such a story from the Six-Day War in 1967. The Six-Day War, fought and won in just 6 days, has been called by some a true miracle. At the same time, others insist it was a consummate demonstration of planning, preparation, and battlefield courage. Whatever your position on miracles, it was certainly against all odds. For many, the Six-Day War in 1967 ultimately came down to the battle for Jerusalem. It is the most sacred place in Jewish history. The fight for its control was desperate and difficult. Yoram Zamush was a young paratrooper assigned to the capture of the Temple Mount. I met him in front of the western wall of the temple. Yoram, when you first heard that your unit was going to have the mission of breaking through into the old city of Jerusalem, how did you feel?
Myself, maybe more than others, had a sense of longing for this city. To think we were about to finally fight in Jerusalem to liberate it. Remembering our parents, grandparents back in Auschwitz, this was the climax of their wishes. When we spoke among ourselves, we felt we were touching and even making history.
It was not a very easy thing to get into the old city, was it?
It was a very difficult battle. We lost a third of our unit. There were more than 86 casualties. Hundreds were wounded.
רגע, חכו רגע. קח צעד קדימה. קדם אחד קדימה.
The city seemed deserted, but there was a danger of snipers everywhere. The way to the Wailing Wall was through the green door, which we found locked. An old Arab man suddenly stepped forward and, speaking in Hebrew, greeted us. He said he wanted peace in the holy city. For several minutes, we were at the wall's courtyard, just a handful of us soldiers. Those first minutes were so quiet, no gunshots. We all prayed, even those of us who weren't great believers. We all wanted to be part of the Jewish people at that point. We were the messengers of the entire Jewish people throughout all generations. We haven't arrived at this point by accident.
Instead of annihilation, Israel won one of the most decisive victories in military history. Islamic leaders were saying we're going to throw Jews into the sea, and it looked like another Holocaust was imminent. And suddenly, in 6 days, the Jewish people defended themselves, destroyed their enemies, tripled their land, recaptured control of Jerusalem for the first time in 2,000 years, and on the seventh day they rested. That just sounded way too biblical for evangelicals all over the planet, and they rejoiced with the Jewish people.
Who was the commander of the Israeli forces, and who was a very secular person. He went to visit the Western Wall the day after it was liberated, put a little note to God between the crevices of the wall, and of course as soon as he left, the newspaper men in their typical discreet way ran and took the note out and read it. What did it say? This is from God. It's wondrous in our eyes.
I'll tell you something, this is such nostalgia for me, especially after so many years, just to walk in the same place where I used to be. You know, this area over there, just in front of us there, if you can look there. We were on foot trying to find a way to get to this village.
David Yaniv was a young tank commander during the Yom Kippur War. We met on a windswept hillside just above a battlefield that holds some incredible memories for David and his comrades.
So what do you do in a situation like that?
You get on your knees very quickly. You take out your bayonet and you start finding mines.
This is a life-threatening situation. In other words, if you went forward, it was dangerous. What about just retreating?
Whichever way, whether it's to the left, to the right, backwards or forwards, I mean, it's a minefield. We did the best we could. And we dug ourselves, we managed to expose a few and dismantle them. And it was a very slow process. But at this particular point, a very, very strong gust of wind came. Something which we could not explain at all. I mean, it was so strong that we literally felt that we were flying away. That's how strong it was. And mines that were buried 25, 30 centimeters in the ground just exposed themselves. And we didn't have to dig them out. We were just walking through them.
This is something I gather you hadn't seen the likes of before.
No way did we see that. In fact, when we came back, nobody could understand that. And of course, we didn't think of it as a miraculous thing from God or anything. We just thought, well, that was just a fluke, a wind that came, which we couldn't explain, and that was it.
Well, when did the thought first hit you that it might have been an act of God?
When we came back and we're alive, when we really touched ourselves and thought, well, we're alive. A wind like this didn't happen before. It didn't happen afterwards. The minute these mines were exposed, that was it. There was no more wind. It was like the calm after the storm.
The battle for the Golan will ultimately come down to this final confrontation at a hilltop called Little Hermon, and the valley below it that will be known forever after as the Vale of Tears. If the Syrians make it past this point, nothing will stop them from storming across the Galilee, destroying Tiberias, Haifa, and ultimately Tel Aviv. Kahalane's remaining tanks have all taken Syrian hits. Many have lost commanders or whole crews. Command discipline is low. Morale is failing. Defeat is in the air. Kahalani gives an order to his tank commanders to move forward. No one moves. He tries cajoling them, even starting forward himself. No other tank follows. Kahalani had faced death in 1967 and survived, just as David had once faced down a bear and a lion that attacked his sheep. Both young men refused to bow to fear. David stepped up to face Goliath. Kahalani ordered his tank to move forward. David had declared, "I come not with sword and shield, but in the name of the God of Israel." He carried only 5 stones into battle with his giant. Kahalani moves forward with only 7 tanks to face the massive Syrian armada. Kahalani's crippled tanks storm the hill before them, looking down at the once green valley, now blackened with the smoldering remains of hundreds of burning Syrian and Israeli tanks from 3 days of fierce fighting. Moving among them, hundreds of Syrian tanks continue their relentless advance. Kahalani orders his tanks to begin a barrage of gunfire on the advancing armada below, not expecting to stop them, but at least hoping to slow their advance long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Reinforcements don't come, but suddenly, to his amazement and without explanation, the Syrians seem struck with fear. The enemy armada begins retreating. Syrian soldiers begin running from the battlefield in all directions. Before it was over, the Yom Kippur War demonstrated one of the most incredible turnaround victories ever recorded in military history. For his bravery and valor in the Vale of Tears, Avigdor Kahalani was dubbed a hero of Israel. He received the nation's highest accolade for courage in the defense of his country. He would only say that his men fought well, and that it was a miracle that saved Israel that day.